Welcome back to Crypto Equation, the place where we decode the future of money. And today we enter a moment that many people are misunderstanding because the noise around it is so loud that the truth gets buried beneath panic, confusion, and speculation. The United States shutdown has ended, but what comes next is far more important than the shutdown itself. Most people believe a shutdown is only about government workers, budgets, and political conflict. But the deeper truth is that shutdowns expose weaknesses in the financial system. Weaknesses that reveal how fragile the old infrastructure really is and how urgently the world needs something faster, more efficient, and more resilient. And whenever the government reopens after a shutdown, the real question is not what happened inside Washington. The real question is what happens after. Because every shutdown, whether it lasts days or weeks, leaves behind a trail of delays, stalled decisions, frozen regulatory processes, liquidity disruptions, and institutional uncertainty. And for digital assets like XRP, these moments are not threats. They are signals. Signals about how the world is changing and how traditional systems are struggling to keep up with the speed of modern finance. To understand what the end of the shutdown means for XRP, you must first understand what a shutdown really represents. A shutdown is not simply a political disagreement. It is a demonstration of how dependent the entire financial system is on slow manual government processes. During a shutdown, everything from regulatory approvals to compliance checks to financial oversight pauses. Agencies responsible for monitoring markets, processing licenses, guiding innovation, and enforcing rules are suddenly silent. This silence is not intentional, it is structural. And it exposes a deeper truth about the old financial model. It is not designed for resilience. It is not designed for automation. It is not designed for real-time continuity. When one part of the system stops, the entire structure slows. This fragility is what digital assets were created to solve. Now that the shutdown is over, regulators are rushing back to massive backlogs. Decisions delayed now become decisions compressed. Projects paused now resume under pressure. Financial oversight that froze must now catch up. And while the public focuses on political headlines, institutions focus on something else entirely: the long-term modernization of financial infrastructure. They recognize that each shutdown is a reminder that legacy systems cannot sustain the demands of a global digital economy. They understand that the world needs faster rails, instant settlement, real-time compliance, and automated systems that can continue operating even when governments temporarily cannot. This is where XRP enters the conversation, not as a speculative asset, but as a tool built for a world that demands uninterrupted liquidity. Every time a shutdown ends, people rush back to normality without understanding that the shutdown created cracks in the foundation of the old financial system. These cracks do not disappear when the government reopens. They grow deeper. Because the more frequently shutdowns occur and the more severe they become, the more institutions begin to question the reliability of outdated infrastructure. They start asking themselves what happens when markets must operate in real time, but government agencies cannot. What happens when global liquidity depends on systems that can freeze due to political gridlock? What happens when innovation is slowed because oversight offices have no staff to review applications? This is the friction that XRP was created to eliminate. The truth is, XRP thrives in environments where efficiency is required, but the old system struggles to provide it. Settlement systems must run even when politics fails. Liquidity must move even when agencies close. Value must flow even when human processes pause. XRP was built for resilience. It was built to continue functioning regardless of shutdowns, recessions, turbulence, or political conflict. It is designed to move value instantly, regardless of borders or government delays. And when a shutdown ends, regulators and institutions look at the backlog of work waiting for them and realize again and again that the current system cannot scale. That realization is what drives the conversation forward. Not price, not hype, utility. After every shutdown, something important happens behind the scenes. Regulatory agencies accelerate digital framework development. Whether the public hears about it or not, the internal urgency increases. They see firsthand how vulnerable analog oversight is. They understand that the next generation of financial infrastructure must be more automated, more interoperable, and more reliable during national disruptions. This is why digital asset regulation has been accelerating globally, not because of hype, but because governments now understand the stakes. Shutdowns expose these stakes brutally. You also need to understand how shutdowns affect institutional psychology. Institutions hate uncertainty, not market uncertainty, regulatory uncertainty. They can handle volatility. They cannot handle missing rules. During a shutdown, the absence of guidance forces them to pause innovation. They hold back on decisions, they delay integrations, not because they want to, but because they must. Once the shutdown ends, they immediately begin clearing the backlog of strategies they put on hold. And that moment after the shutdown is where XRP becomes relevant. because XRP is not waiting for approval to provide utility. It is already functional. It is already integrated in corridors. It is already aligned with the direction institutions are heading. The end of the shutdown marks the return of regulatory momentum, and regulatory momentum is the most important element in the evolution from speculation to utility. For XRP, the question is not what happens during the shutdown, but what accelerates after it. Agencies resume testing frameworks. Policymakers resume discussions. Institutions resume digital strategies. Tokenization proposals move forward. Payment companies restart their plans. Ripple resumes its regulatory conversations. Everything that was paused becomes active again. And this renewed motion reopens the pathway toward clarity. Shutdowns create temporary darkness, but clarity returns when the government reopens. And clarity is the key to institutional adoption. Institutions do not adopt systems without regulatory visibility. They need frameworks, not forecasts. They need compliance rules, not rumors. They need infrastructure, not narrative. And every time the government restarts its machine of oversight, it moves one step closer to creating the clarity needed for digital assets to operate. At scale, XRP benefits not from speculation, but from this clarity. There is another layer most people never consider. Shutdowns reveal the tension between traditional settlement systems and modern expectations. Today, the world expects speed, instant transactions, real-time updates, frictionless experiences, but the settlement systems behind global finance still operate at the pace of manual processes. Compliance checks take time, audits take time, liquidity settlement takes time, and during shutdowns, those time frames extend even more. This exposes something critical: the old system cannot keep up with modern demand. XRP exists because the world is moving faster than the systems that support it. Shutdowns make this impossible to ignore. Institutions know that shutdowns are becoming more frequent. They know that political gridlock is increasing. They know that legacy systems cannot survive in a world where interruptions can freeze global processes. This is why they are searching for ways to decouple modern financial infrastructure from political instability. Not to remove regulation, but to remove fragility. Blockchain-based solutions like XRP are not just technological improvements. They are resilience improvements. Tools that enable financial systems to continue functioning even when government offices cannot. The ending of a shutdown also affects global perception. Other nations watch the United States carefully. When the US government shuts down, it signals instability to international markets. It raises questions about the reliability of American financial oversight. And when the shutdown ends, those questions do not disappear. They become catalysts for other nations to accelerate their own digital transformation strategies. Nations that are exploring real-time settlement networks, interoperability frameworks, and tokenized asset platforms often include XRP in their studies because its design is aligned with these global trends. What does this mean for XRP? It means something that most people overlook. Shutdowns are temporary, but the lessons they teach are permanent. The world sees how fragile traditional systems are. The world sees how delays cause financial uncertainty. The world sees how outdated rails cannot support modern liquidity. The world sees how critical it is to move beyond manual oversight into automated compliance. And every time this realization becomes stronger, it strengthens the case for digital assets built for settlement scale and speed. Shutdowns also affect liquidity psychology. When agencies pause, institutions hesitate. Liquidity slows. This ripple effect exposes how deeply the current system relies on human processes. But XRP's architecture does not depend on those processes. It can move value whether agencies are open or closed. And that independence makes it useful in an increasingly unstable world, not as a financial guarantee, as a technological capability. Where shutdowns create vulnerability, XRP represents resilience. Where shutdowns create delay, XRP represents immediacy. Where shutdowns reveal fragmentation, XRP represents interoperability. Where shutdowns expose inefficiency, XRP represents optimization. But the shutdown's end is not just a return to normalcy. It is the beginning of the next cycle of regulatory urgency. Lawmakers know the world is moving toward digital finance. Agencies know they must modernize. Institutions know they must prepare. And the shutdown simply reminded them how fragile the system still is. This reminder accelerates innovation. The question now is how this acceleration affects the long-term trajectory of digital settlement technologies. Because the next phase of regulation is about defining the role of digital assets within national and international infrastructure It is about designing rules that allow institutions to adopt digital settlement layers with confidence. It is about creating compliance frameworks that allow real-time value to move globally without breaking regulations. XRP fits into this conversation because its design aligns with the goals regulators are trying to achieve: fast, transparent, auditable, efficient, and scalable settlement. It is not about speculation. It is about solving the problems that shutdowns expose. And those problems are not small, they are foundational. Shutdowns expose that financial systems are too centralized, dependent on manual processes, and vulnerable to political disruption. Digital settlement systems solve this by decentralizing operational flow and enabling resilience. Shutdowns expose that cross-border transfers rely on outdated rails that cannot function during administrative pauses. Digital networks solve this by enabling continuous settlement irrespective of political timelines. Shutdowns expose that compliance processes cannot scale in a rapidly growing digital economy. Automated systems solve this by providing real-time visibility and auditable pathways. None of this means XRP is guaranteed anything. It means the world is moving towards systems built for the future. Systems that will eventually require assets like XRP because they provide utility in ways legacy systems cannot. The shutdown is over, but the transformation it revealed is only beginning. And the second half of this story dives into what comes next, not in speculation, but in understanding how institutions behave after disruption and what this means for the evolution of modern digital settlement networks like XRP. Because the real impact of the shutdown is not found in headlines. It is found in how the world responds to the fragility it exposed. And this is where the deeper impact begins, because when a shutdown ends, the world does not simply move forward. The world recalibrates. Institutions revisit their strategies. Regulators reassess their priorities. Agencies re-examine their frameworks. Every office that was forced into silence returns with urgency, because time lost in a shutdown cannot be recovered, it must be compensated. And in that compensation lies the acceleration that most people overlook. The system recognizes its own fragility, and fragility always sparks evolution. For digital assets like XRP, this evolution is not based on hope. It is based on necessity. The old financial architecture cannot withstand endless cycles of political standoff and operational freezes. Systems built for the future must be immune to shutdown exposure. Institutions understand this faster than anyone. They rely on consistency. They rely on clarity. They rely on predictable liquidity. When a shutdown disrupts these elements, they do not respond with panic. They respond with planning. They begin imagining infrastructures that cannot be paused, settlement layers that cannot be frozen, compliance frameworks that can operate automatically, technologies that can bridge value across borders without waiting for government offices to reopen. XRP exists in this intersection between institutional need and technological readiness. Its design reflects the direction institutions must move to guarantee continuity. When the shutdown ends, the first wave of activity is regulatory catch-up. Cases stalled now resume. Policy drafts frozen now move forward. Cross-agency communication returns. But beneath this administrative rush, there is something more subtle. Institutions begin accelerating their digital transformation agendas. They understand that the next time a shutdown occurs, which history shows is inevitable, they need systems that continue running without friction. Because in a global economy, downtime is costly, delays are costly, manual processes are costly. This realization forces them to look at blockchain-based settlement networks with new urgency, not for speculation, but for stability. Shutdowns are moments of exposure, and exposure reveals what must change. Regulatory agencies realize that oversight systems dependent on thousands of employees cannot survive future disruptions. They begin studying automated compliance systems where digital assets provide real-time transparency. Payment providers realize that relying on government approval cycles slows innovation. They begin exploring settlement layers that can operate independently of political timelines. International partners realize that the United States legislative environment introduces instability into global coordination. They begin accelerating their own digital currency and tokenization frameworks. Every one of these shifts pushes the world closer to the infrastructure that networks like XRP are built for. Now that the shutdown is over, the next stage is synchronization. Agencies must synchronize with each other. Institutions must synchronize with regulators. Global partners must synchronize with the United States. Synchronization after chaos is one of the most powerful accelerators of modernization. Everyone wants to avoid future disruption. Everyone wants future systems to be resilient. Everyone wants the next shutdown to have as little impact as possible. and achieving that requires modernization. Modernization requires digital infrastructure, and digital infrastructure requires networks that can operate across borders, across systems, and across institutions with immediate settlement. This is the environment where XRP becomes meaningful, not because of price, but because of purpose. Purpose is the foundation of every technology that survives long term. Technologies survive not because of hype, but because the world needs them. And the world does not merely want efficiency, it requires it. The shutdown exposed how inefficient the old system is. It exposed how dependent it is on manual processes and political stability. It exposed the need for real-time infrastructure. Institutions now return to discussions they were having before the shutdown, but now with renewed urgency, tokenization pilots resume. Cross-border testing continues. Digital asset custody frameworks advance. Regulatory bodies reassess their guidelines on interoperability. This is not speculation. These are structural movements that occur every time government operations resume after major disruptions. The system does not return to normal. The system evolves beyond what normal used to be. Shutdowns push innovation into the spotlight. Not the innovation people talk about on social media, but the innovation governments and financial institutions must adopt to prevent fragility from becoming systemic XRP is one of the technologies that fits into this category because it provides something legacy systems cannot resilience through automation. Consider how global markets reacted during previous shutdowns. Liquidity slowed, cross-border coordination weakened, government oversight paused, audits were delayed, financial crime monitoring reduced. All of these are vulnerabilities, and vulnerabilities invite modernization. When the shutdown ends, institutions immediately focus on solving these vulnerabilities, not with temporary fixes, but with permanent infrastructure. Blockchain-based settlement layers are one of the permanent solutions. This is why institutions study networks like XRP, not because they are trendy, but because their architecture solves real vulnerabilities. Another important aspect of post-shutdown analysis is legislative urgency. Politicians know that shutdowns expose systemic weakness to the world. They understand that global confidence in the United States financial system is partly rooted in the ability of its government to operate consistently. When shutdowns disrupt that confidence, lawmakers often accelerate discussions around financial modernization. Digital asset policy becomes part of that conversation, not because of market pressure, but because digital assets provide tools that reduce reliance on fragile legacy rails. This means regulatory clarity does not slow after shutdowns. It accelerates. Agencies that could not communicate before now coordinate faster committees. That paused hearings now reschedule aggressively. Policymakers who delayed frameworks now prioritize them. And behind these moves lies a simple truth: the world cannot run on systems that can pause, settlement cannot pause. Liquidity cannot pause. Global trade cannot pause. Innovation cannot pause. But government operations can and do. Therefore, systems that are independent of government downtime become essential. XRP aligns with the direction of this independence. Not independence from regulation, but independence from fragility. It offers a settlement mechanism that does not depend on the government being open at every moment. And this capability becomes more valuable with each shutdown. This is not about predicting outcomes. It is about observing patterns. Shutdowns create cracks. Innovation fills those cracks. Another often overlooked consequence of shutdowns is how they influence global competition. Other nations see the United States experience operational paralysis, and they accelerate their own digital infrastructure to gain economic advantage. They want systems that do not freeze. They want systems that are not tied to political standoffs. They want systems that keep liquidity flowing. This global acceleration increases the urgency for the United States to modernize its own financial rails. And digital asset integration becomes part of that modern infrastructure. This is why XRP remains part of global conversation surrounding cross-border settlement, not because of speculation, but because its technology solves cross-border settlement inefficiencies that shutdowns reveal. When the United States stalls, Europe, Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America do not stall. They move ahead, and the United States cannot afford to fall behind. This puts enormous pressure on US agencies to accelerate modernization. This acceleration benefits every digital asset designed for real-world utility. The end of the shutdown also unlocks something powerful: institutional analysis. Institutions will now evaluate how the shutdown impacted liquidity flows, settlement processes, regulatory coordination, and cross-border movement. These analyses will highlight inefficiencies. Those inefficiencies will be documented. And the documented inefficiencies will drive modernization initiatives. Blockchain settlement layers are often proposed during these discussions because they offer immediate solutions to slowdowns revealed by shutdowns. This does not mean XRP is guaranteed adoption, but it means the world is moving towards systems that XRP was built for. A world where settlement cannot pause, a world where value must move instantly, a world where interoperability is not optional, a world where regulatory frameworks must function digitally, a world where systems must continue operating even when political processes collapse. Shutdowns accelerate innovation because they force the world to confront what is not working. And what is not working is the old financial infrastructure. Shutdowns highlight its weaknesses. Innovation provides the cure. As regulators return to work, they will restore communications with global partners, resume industry meetings, reopen innovation sandboxes, and restart digital asset working groups. This is where the momentum picks up. The shutdown created delay. The reopening creates acceleration. Acceleration is what drives the next phase of the digital financial transformation. People often ask what all of this means for XRP. The answer is simple. It means the world is moving toward the systems that XRP was designed to support. It means the environment is shifting toward digital settlement. It means institutions are realizing the need for resilient infrastructure. It means regulators are returning to conversations about digital frameworks. It means innovation is being prioritized after fragility was exposed. It means utility matters more than ever. The shutdown being over is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of the next chapter, a chapter where the urgency to modernize becomes unavoidable, a chapter where institutions must adapt or fall behind, a chapter where regulators must create clarity or lose global competitive advantage, a chapter where digital assets evolve from possibility to infrastructure. Shutdowns show the world that the old system is not sustainable. Modernization shows the world what comes next. And in that next phase, technologies designed for speed efficiency and interoperability like XRP are no longer optional. They become part of the solution the world needs. This is not about predicting outcomes. It is about understanding direction. The direction is clear. The world is moving toward digital settlement. Real-time liquidity, global interoperability, and automated financial infrastructure. Shutdowns accelerate that journey, and the end of the shutdown signals the return of momentum toward that future. And those who understand this direction, those who pay attention to the structural shifts, those who look beyond headlines are the ones who will see the transformation, while the rest of the world waits for someone to explain it after it happens. The shutdown is over, but the evolution it triggered is just beginning. The shutdown is over, but the transformation it revealed is only beginning. And the second half of this story dives into what comes next, not in speculation, but in understanding how institutions behave after disruption, and what this means for the evolution of modern digital settlement networks like XRP. Because the real impact of the shutdown is not found in headlines. It is found in how the world responds to the fragility it exposed.